Hello, everyone. It's great to have you here. Thank you very much for coming. Let me turn this on. I know it's a Friday afternoon, and it's really amazing and an honor to me to see that you chose to spend this hour, working on your professional development. It's really, it's a pleasure, really. Thank you very much for coming. So today we're going to talk about teaching teens. It's yet another one of our webinars on our Teaching Teens series. And today is about promoting cross-cultural understanding, as you know. So we all know that living in a globalized world highlights new challenges and opportunities for both students and for us teachers. So our students, our teenage students, besides trying to identify their tribe and determine where they belong, they can also, in our English classrooms, they can be encouraged to better understand and interact with different cultures of our plural world, right? So cross-cultural understanding promotes this higher level of tolerance and respect for others. So what we will do today, as you must have read in the abstract for today's session, we will discuss the what, why, and how of cross-cultural understanding, and we'll also examine ways to include it in our everyday classes, okay? So a little bit of housekeeping before we actually start. I don't know if you have met me or if you have been in one of my sessions and webinars. So I'm Daniela Meyer. I'm an academic consultant for Cambridge University Press in Latin America, mostly Brazil. Here's my contact information if you want to get in touch with me after the session. And I also have an Instagram account. So if you want to follow me on Instagram, feel free to do so. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping before we actually get to the topic, to today's cross-cultural understanding. First and foremost, you will be issued a certificate, of course, right? The link to the certificate will be given to you through chat box at the end of the session. And you will be asked to complete a very short feedback questionnaire before you get your certificate. The certificate does not come with your name written on it. You have to download the certificate, then put your name in, and then save your certificate, okay? So you're going to be getting this link at the end of our session today. I'm also going to be asking you a few questions, during the session, because I would like this to be even more interactive than it can be when we're using, this remote system. But I will be asking you some questions, some specific questions, and I'll ask you to put your answers in chat box. And there may be a few times that I will ask you to do pair work with yourself. So, bear along and ask yourself, and remember that when we talk to ourselves, there's always a guarantee of an intelligent conversation, right? At the end of the session, we will have time for questions and answers. Well, I hope you have questions and I hope to have answers. And so if there's anything you want to ask during the session, I'm not going to be looking at the chat all the time. So you can put your question in chat box, and then one of my colleagues who's helping to administer this is going to select the questions and put them under the Q&A, okay? So don't wait until the end if you have a burning question. If there's something I say that you want to ask more about, or you didn't understand, or if you want to contribute with something, put it in the chat immediately so that you don't forget, what the question was at the end. All right? Okay, so having done the housekeeping and having introduced myself, let's then go to the agenda. What is it that I hope to do, or that we are going to probably do together today? We're going to be talking about the what and the why of cross-cultural understanding. We're also going to be looking at the how. How is it that we include cross-cultural understanding activities in our English lessons? And we're going to be looking at that if you're thinking of working with cross-cultural understanding with textbooks and without textbooks. And then at the end, we'll have our Q&A session, okay? All right, so we're going to start with the what. What is cross-cultural understanding? If you ask yourself what cross-cultural understanding is, what would you say? If you were asked to define cross-cultural understanding, what would you say? Ask yourself. You don't need to put it in chat because it might be long. But if I asked you, can you give me a definition of cross-cultural understanding? What would your definition be? Well, one of the ways of describing or defining cross-cultural understanding is, if we can say that someone's cross-cultural understanding is their understanding of the differences between themselves and people from other countries or other backgrounds, especially differences in attitudes and values. Simply put, cross-cultural understanding is about understanding that our cultures impact and shape how we see the world, and that differences are natural when we work with people from other cultures. We need to be aware of where, when, and how our cultures may either help or hinder us in terms of communication and collaboration. I suspect you had a definition that was similar to this. Another aspect that we have to consider when we think of the how of cross-cultural understanding is that there are all of these terms that are also used interchangeably with cross-cultural understanding, and they mean more or less the same. So you may hear about the term cross-cultural competence being used. You may hear intercultural competence or even intercultural education as a subject per se. You may hear about cultural awareness, and all of them are used in the literature about cross-cultural understanding interchangeably, as I said. So the other aspect of the what of cross-cultural understanding is that it usually includes this acronym, CASA. Have you heard of CASA? Had you seen this acronym before? Can you put an answer in chat box, please? Have you heard of this acronym? Hello, everyone, again. I see people from France, from Buenos Aires, from Porto Alegre, from Santa Rosa, never, good. It's good to know, no, I have not, good. So here's something new already, right? When we think about cross-cultural understanding, there are some aspects that are involved, and these aspects are described in this acronym. The K is for knowledge and understanding. So one has to understand and have knowledge of cultures, of cross-cultural understanding, different cultures. The first A is attitude, is about students' attitude or our attitude to different cultures, right? The third letter, S, is about the skills. Which skills do you need to be able to understand different cultures, to have cultural awareness or cross-cultural awareness? And the second A in CASA is the action. So what action are you going to take after you have the knowledge and understanding, and then you determine the attitude and the skills that you need? What is the action that you're going to take regarding cross-cultural understanding or cross-cultural awareness? So all of these are aspects of the what of cross-cultural understanding. We then move to the why. Okay, now that we understand what cross-cultural understanding is, and the term itself is very obvious, right? It's understanding different cultures and all. So now we're going to talk about the why. It's a very important aspect of cross-cultural understanding. Why? Why is it important? Why should it be used? Why should it be included in our English classes? What do you think? Once again, ask yourself, why is cross-cultural understanding important? And why should it be included in our English classes? Please put your answers in chat box. Try to be succinct, brief, but it's okay if you're not. I'm going to look at your answers. So why is it important? to help communication. Yes, Adriana, absolutely. Communication amongst different people in different cultures. What else? Can anybody think of another reason? Like if you were asked why you think cross-cultural understanding is important for teenagers, why would, what would you say? Yes, Juliana is saying that English is an international language, is a lingua franca, and also that language is a part of culture, absolutely. Paula is also saying that it's important to understand the world. Eurico says is to be respectful of our increasingly multicultural classes. Absolutely, yes, exactly along those lines, I agree. And we know that the ability to understand one another across and beyond all types of cultural barriers is a prerequisite for making our diverse societies work, right? And as you said, I think it was Eurico that said, you know, our multicultural classes, right? So as we can see with the current events, right, there is an urgent need for an effort to develop the necessary attitudes, skills, and knowledge that are going to contribute to intercultural competence or cross-cultural understanding in the everyday practice of teaching and learning, so that we can have future generations equipped with the necessary, equipped and participating in an increasingly global and complex environment, right? So how can we do this? And so it's what you said, and for all the reasons that our world is more and more global every day and more complex. So let's look at a real life example. Have you ever seen a situation like this? Well, why is this not going anywhere? Ha, okay. So imagine you are, you know, lots of people traveling abroad for a business situation. And do you know where they are based on the pictures? Do you think, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be in a specific country, but you may have seen or heard about this sort of situation that people, because of different cultures, you see one person is trying to give their business card with the two hands, probably a Japanese person. The other person does not know what to do. So the other person is saying, what do I do now? The woman is trying to get closer to the man, and the man is going backwards, thinking, oh, personal space invasion. And the other person is there going namaste and thinking, oh my, I'm next. What am I going to do? Right? So we know that people act according to the values and norms of his or her cultures, right? And another person holding a different worldview may interpret these behaviors from an opposite standpoint. So this situation, kind of like this that you see in the cartoon, can create misunderstanding and can lead to conflict, right? And of course, we know that a language and culture go together because we interact with people through language. So we have an instance here of cross-cultural misunderstanding, right? And it's very business it's very common in business situations around the world. And okay, so why is that common? Why does that happen? Not only because people are not so used to other cultures, but because when we think about sending a message in communication, what is involved in a message? It may seem very simple, a message, or a sentence or something, but it's actually not. Take a look at this quick graph on your screen. Let's look at language just a little bit, because language and culture are always intertwined, right? So there's always a sender that is sending a message through a channel, and there's a receiver, okay? So here's just an explanation that you're sending, one person is sending a message through a channel, and there's a receiver. Let me give you another example, a more practical example. Imagine, so you see, we have the sender and the message, the channel and the receiver. So imagine I'm talking to my significant other. It's the end of the afternoon on a cold, rainy day, and we're at home. I say to him, I could really murder a cup of tea. I'm using a verbal channel, right? So I'm the sender, the message is, I could really murder a cup of tea. And I'm using a verbal channel because I'm speaking to him. My boyfriend, the receiver, right, hears me and decodes the following message. He heard my message, which was encoded in, I could really murder a cup of tea. And he decodes the message and thinks, she wants me to make her a cup of tea. He then gives me feedback. Do you take sugar? Which I in turn decode to mean that he will make me a cup of tea. So you see, this was an exchange of two sentences, and there's all of this going on with language and messages. Can you see all that is involved in one apparently simple interaction? And when we are not aware of the possible cultural differences, we may have problem with the encoding and decoding of messages, let alone with the channel. I mean, if you're speaking face to face, it's one thing. If you're going through WhatsApp, it's completely different. So there may be many problems based obviously on language, but also based on cultural misconceptions, right? So you may be thinking now, right, all of this makes sense, but this is a business example with adult speakers. And this talk is about cross-cultural understanding for teenagers. Yes, but so do you think all of our teenagers are equal and the same? We have so many different tribes everywhere, so many differences in teenagers around the world or even around Brazil, that they too have trouble with their messages, right? And it's much easier nowadays for teenagers to communicate with people from the other side of the world, isn't it? So it is also important to help our teenagers with cross-cultural understanding. One of the reasons is that learners often compare what is unfamiliar with what is familiar. And usually they evaluate the unfamiliar as bizarre or worse, or even as uncivilized. We may have done that too. It's not just teenagers and students that do that. I think it's typical of everyone for us to think that the way we do things is the normal and the correct way, and the way other people do things is weird, is strange, is bizarre, right? So we have to deal with that in the classroom. That is yet another reason why we could deal with this and encourage more cross-cultural understanding activities in our English lessons, so that our teenage students get better at that. Last but not least, there's one other reason why we should include cross-cultural understanding in our classes. And it's because it is mentioned in our BNCC. For those of you that are not from Brazil, BNCC means Base Nacional Comum Curricular. It's sort of like the set of principles that underlie the regular schools here in Brazil. So if you're teaching in a school, if you're teaching English to teenagers in schools, there's the BNCC that mentions cultural dimensions, right? The cultural dimension of English in what is our junior high, so to speak, right? So the BNCC mentions that, and the need to understand cultures, and especially nowadays that all the cultures and the societies are always changing and moving. So that is yet another reason to include cross-cultural understanding. Okay, so far so good. So let's move on to the how. So how do we do that? We have looked at what cross-cultural understanding is, and we have looked at why it is crucial and important to include it in our lessons for teenagers, not only, also for adults and for kids, as much as possible, but we're focusing on teenagers now. So let's look at how we can do this in our classrooms. Remember I said in the beginning that there are many terms and that they are interchangeable, used interchangeably. So one of the terms that is similar to cross-cultural understanding is intercultural education. And intercultural education, I'm going to let you read this. Can you read what's on the screen? I'll give you 30 seconds. You mentioned this already, right? When I asked you why, many of you said because the world is global, because our classes are more and more multicultural, because language and culture go together. So intercultural education is already a subject per se. And the purpose, one of the purposes is to develop this intercultural competence in all students of all ages as a foundation for dialogue and for living together. So the better our teenagers are at this, the better the world will be, hopefully, okay? So there are some things that we can think about when we think about having cross-cultural activities in our classrooms. We can have experiences, we can encourage comparison, we can have students analyze different aspects of different cultures. We can and should encourage reflection. And then as a last step, if possible, which action are they going to take, right? How are they going to act based on this knowledge and understanding that they gained from experiences or from comparing or from analyzing, right? So before we can get started on the suggestions that I gave you on the previous slide, like that we can use experiences and comparison and analysis and etc. I believe there is another aspect that needs to be considered first. I'm going to show you a short video to exemplify, okay? Very short video. I'm going to ask you a favor though. If you have seen this video before, I'm going to ask you to please refrain from giving the answer, okay? It's going to be a task for all of you, a very simple task that you will have to do based on the video. The video actually asks you a question. It doesn't matter if you don't hear well, if the sound is not good, because the question shows up on the screen, okay? So if you have seen it, please do not give the answer away in chat box. Please just sit quietly and bear with us. It's just 2.5 minutes. Or a little less, I think, okay? So do you understand what you have to do? I'm going to show you a short video, and there's going to be a question right at the beginning of what you have to do. That question is a task. So you have to pay attention to the question, then complete the task, and then I'll check with you afterwards, okay? And if you know the answer, don't give it away, please. Oops, here we are. So I need to do this. There we go.
Passes does the team in white make?
Okay, sorry, that was a bit too much. There.
How many passes does the team in white make?
How many passes? How many? Don't give the answer if you had already seen this. How many passes does the team in white make? 12, 13, 14, 12, 9, 12. Okay. All right. Now pay attention to the continuation of the video. I think it's actually 13, but did you see the moonwalking bear? There's a bear that walks through the basketball teams. Take a look.
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Did you see the bear? No, no, no. Okay, but did you see the bear the second time around when I called your attention to it? You probably did. When I asked, yes. Okay, so what's the point of this? It's easy to miss something you're not looking for, right? Because I asked you to first focus on the passes. How many passes did the team in white make? You were not looking for a bear. You were concentrating on the team in white. So you didn't see a moonwalking bear go through the players, right? And why am I saying that? Because I think the most important aspect of the how is that how are we going to teach teenagers cross-cultural understanding? I'd say the most important aspect, the one that perhaps the first to be considered, is the need to raise their awareness, right? I use this video to show you that if you're not aware of the fact that there's going to be a different element in the video, we don't see it. So it's really easy to miss something that we're not looking for. And so if the teenagers or any other students, but in this case, the teenagers are not aware of the fact that there are cross-cultural misconceptions and misunderstandings, and that may affect their communication, they're not going to see it, right? So the first thing we have to do, in my opinion, before we do experiences and comparison and analysis or reflection and action, or even if we call their attention to the CASA acronym, the knowledge and understanding, attitudes, skills, and action, they need to be aware of this. So we need to call their attention to the cross-cultural, the possible cross-cultural differences and misconceptions, and the need to understand other cultures, okay? And the first thing we have to do is also to show them how culture is perceived in different cultures. So yes, how culture is perceived in different cultures. Had you seen this picture of the cultural iceberg before? There are a lot of people that think and say that there's the surface culture, for example, food, music, games, holidays, fashion, language, and there's the deep culture, the part that is not so obvious, such as concepts of time, concepts of beauty. Concept of time is something that in and of itself can create a lot of problems and conflicts, right? For example, for Brazilians, it's okay to arrive 15 or 30 minutes late for a social event, but not for a professional event. And for other cultures, it's absolutely impolite to do so. And there are even other people that will think, oh, 30 minutes, it's okay, I can be an hour late and no problem. And we have differences here in Brazil, right? Sometimes what goes in one region is not the same as in another region. And we can have difference in attitudes, difference in notions, difference in appropriateness. What's the personal space? How close do you get? Can you kiss? Do you kiss? Do you not kiss? So all of this is included in culture, right? So first of all, we need to raise students' awareness. Second of all, we could do many different things. And I want to give you some suggestions with textbooks, okay? So I have chosen one of our newest titles for teenagers that is called Own It. I'm going to give you a spoiler soon about titles for teenagers. But for the time being, we have this title, this series that is called Own It. And I got some examples from Own It. Okay, Own It is British English. We have the corresponding title in American English, which is Shape It. So here's a lesson on food. Food in and of itself can be considered part of a culture, right? So we're already dealing with culture because every textbook has a unit on food. So just, you don't have to see the details of this page. I realize you won't be able to see, but that's okay. I don't need you to see details yet. Just for you to have a sense of what the two pages, this is a 2-page spread, what it looks like. So what can we do? When we're talking about food, we have this part on the left. It says time for a snack, right? And then under time for a snack, we already highlight in Own It 3 different kids. One is from Cambodia, the other one is from Botswana, and the third is from Mexico. So you already see that we're dealing with culture, right? We're encouraging teachers to, comment and explain and have students analyze and experience through comments on what it is that they eat as snacks, right? In these different parts of the world. We then have another page that says my favorite food. And this boy, guess where he's from? He's from Recife, Brazil. So you see, we have, of course, this Own It is not sold only in Brazil. All of our Cambridge titles are sold around the world. So this is João Pereira from Recife in Brazil, right? And then he talks about his favorite food for snacks and for lunch. And so we are already helping you there with the awareness and with cross-cultural understanding. It's an example from Own It, but I'm sure whichever textbook it is that you're using, it will probably have similar things. So when you have your textbooks, watch out. What is it that is already included in your textbooks that will help you discuss and comment and raise students' awareness to cross-cultural understanding? If we continue with the Own It example, Own It also has art projects, CLIL. It has CLIL, which is Content and Language Integrated Learning, as I'm sure you know. And CLIL brings up certain different subject projects. In this case, this is an art project. You see there's a food truck there. And so first of all, the students are going to analyze the example, this food truck with food from the Caribbean, yet another region, another country, another other aspects of eating. And then the students are encouraged with the art project to design their own food truck. And they are helped, obviously, by the teacher's book and everything that is in their student's book. And we also tell them how to plan, how to present, how to check. But this in and of itself is a cultural lesson, right? Because look, we talked about people from Botswana, from Cambodia, from Mexico, Brazil, now the Caribbean, a lot of cultural aspects that can be used for cross-cultural understanding activities, even if the book does not say so like specifically, but you may, start raising your teenagers' awareness. Another unit from Own It. This is actually Own It Level 1. It's a 4-level series, and this is Own It Level 1. So Unit 5 is about style, fashion, what's appropriate in terms of clothing. And that's obviously also part of what our culture iceberg says. It's the deep culture, right? So if you're talking about clothes and style and fashion with teenagers, I'm not going to show you all the pages of this unit now, but in even units, we have the CLIL projects like art or science and etc. And in odd units, we have the around the world pages. So here's another opportunity for you to work on cross-cultural understanding. And this is a 2-page spread, as I said, just for you to have a sense. So what do we do? First of all, we start these 2 pages with a video on culture and fashion. See, there it is. So we ask them we show the video, and they have to pay attention to find out where the blue people live and what do the Sami make and which color is important for the Maasai. That is going to be your homework. You have to find the answers to these 3 questions, okay? Where do the blue people live? What do the Sami make? And which color is important for the Maasai? I'm kidding, but I'm not. Anyway, so we start them off with this, which is also a cross-cultural understanding activity. Then we move the teenagers to talking about festivals and special days. This case, we're talking about weddings in India, right? Remember that the unit is about clothes and style and fashion. And what else do we do with this unit? After they read the magazine, style interview here, we ask them questions about their own country. We ask them, what do people wear in your country for special celebrations? What is a typical wedding like in your country? Are colors important in your country? So of course, most of our classes are monocultural, but we may use this to understand cross-cultural differences amongst regions in Brazil, right? Or if you have a foreign student, we may use that as well. So see, and then we have the culture project in this case. After the Around the World pages, we always have a culture project in Own It, in both Own It and Shape It. And so the students are going to have to set up, to prepare, present a project on a culture page with a look. It's a lookbook. So they have to choose a look, they have to prepare a poster or somehow be able to show that. And there's a lot of support for the students, but this is already included in these textbooks, right? And the students would then be encouraged to discuss and analyze and compare and perhaps use their own experience of a look. Even for the moment, if you were teaching this now, they could use the look of Festa Juninas, right? So there is a lot that can be done with the textbooks that you're using that has a lot of cultural projects and activities for you to develop into cross-cultural understanding activities. Own It also has a space online, is our newest digital digital environment called Cambridge One. And then the students, I'm sure you can't see this well, but it says the last icon on the screen says Collaboration Plus. So if you're teaching remotely, they can put their projects online, and then they can collaborate together online, showing each other these projects. So this is an idea with one textbook for teenagers. As I said, it was Own It and Shape It were our latest teenage title. So the spoiler is we're launching a new series for teenagers now in July. It's going to be called Game Changer. This is the first time that we're telling people that. So it's a very, very new course. It's going to be, the official launch is going to be during Cambridge, our Cambridge Days in July. And also watch out in our social media channels for more information on Game Changers for teens and preteens, okay? All right, another thing you can do with your textbook is, here's an example from Interchange. This is Interchange 5th edition, level 2, unit 10. Once again, if you're an Interchange teacher and you know what's in this conversation, don't say much. But you see, the conversation says, I love playing video games. And the first question is, what are you doing this summer? So I would start the class by saying, okay, guys, what are you doing this summer? Usually unit 10 is given in the second semester, right? But even if it were today, I say, okay, what are you doing this summer? So can you tell me in chat box what your plans are for this summer, please? Imagine you are my teenage students, okay? Imagine you are my teenage students and tell me what your plans are for this summer. What are you doing this summer? I could even put you in a breakout room, right? We'll have to divide you up into groups of 3s or 4s for you to ask each other, what are you doing this summer? Let me see what my teenage, sunbathing as much as I can. Good, Moises. Diogo says he's staying home and watching TV. Maria Silvia says visiting my grandma and etc. Okay, very good. Right, so then after we do this, I can remove, oops, sorry, my mistake, I did something silly. I can remove this, the mask, and I can show them what the conversation says. The second sentence says, May asks Jeff. May is the girl, obviously, and Jeff is the boy, the guy. And May says, what are you doing this summer? And he says, nothing much. I'm broke. I need to find a job. And then she says, so do I. Have you seen anything interesting? So you could use this as a cultural activity, even if it doesn't have anything to do with culture suggested in the textbook. You can use it as a cultural activity, because when do our teenage students look for jobs during the summer? They don't, right? And for older teenagers, but they don't need to be older. When I lived in the States, my brother and sister, they were 10 and 11, and they had jobs during the summer because they wanted to have their own money. So they were doing lots of things. So you can use a regular conversation or anything almost in your textbook, even if it's not meant as a cultural or a cross-cultural understanding activity, and tweak it around a little bit and use it as a cross-cultural understanding activity. You see what I mean? And I have to give the credits, because this was suggested by a friend of mine, Marcinha Pedrosa, many, many years ago, when we were both working for IBEL in Rio de Janeiro. So it's something that you can do with your textbooks. Without textbooks, what can you do? If you're not thinking, okay, you want to teach cross-cultural understanding, but you don't necessarily have to use your textbook. So what can you do? You can, there are many different approaches to teaching and learning that can be proved conducive to developing of intercultural competence. And they're mostly experiential learning, which means learn to do by doing. Active and cooperative learning, because we know that when the students are active, they're using metodologias ativas or active learning that we have been using in ESL, in our English lessons, since the 1980s. So we need students to be active and cooperating in groups, right? The more they do that, the better they will understand and learn. And we can use lots of project work for this. So if you don't have a textbook that sets up culture projects and around the world projects, around the world pages like the ones I showed you, you can set them up by yourself. But then are you going to do all this stuff? Are you going to come and prepare the whole culture project and bring it to students? I do not recommend that. I think it's better to get the students involved and have them find the information that they need, right? So once again, how can you decide which topics to use? Use the cultural iceberg. We have food, music, literature, language, festivals, dances. All of that is considered the surface culture. And the deep culture, all of the rest, approaches, concepts, notions, attitudes towards this or that, lots of different aspects to be considered. I'll give you a few examples. Just for example, a picture can be the starting point for a cross-cultural activity. Have you ever seen the world map like this? It's a quote unquote upside down map. They're not usually encountered in this way, are they? And this sort of picture can stimulate discussion on points of view that are frequent or dominant. Why is it that we always see it that way? Who said that North has to be on top and South has to be at the bottom? Does the United States look much bigger than Brazil with this perspective? Right? So there are lots of things that you can do with just a picture. So you can encourage different points of view that are less than customary. Another way that you can do this is with a picture of a natural phenomenon. Sometimes that they get to see in science classes, but you can use just a picture. Does anybody know where this is? If you do, put it in chat box, please. Adriana says no. I'm sure somebody will know. Yes, Rafael, Stonehenge. Stonehenge in the UK, in England. Yes, I was there too a couple of years ago before the pandemic. Lovely place. So there are lots of legends on this. We don't know for sure how this was set up, but also look at the sun here. What's going on with the sun? Can you see the eclipse? So this is something that will create different perspectives if you get students to analyze, okay, so how come Stonehenge was built like thousands of years ago, and how did they manage to move these stones? These stones are huge, huge. I should have put a picture of me next to the stones. How did they manage to do that at that time? And also, how would they have felt like 3,000 years ago when they saw an eclipse? This is going to help them have multiple perspectives and start to understand the possibilities, right? And the diversity that is possible. Another way you can do without textbooks, another thing you can do without textbooks is use your students. If you have any idea of what I mean by that, please put your idea in chat box. How can you use your own students in your classroom to teach cross-cultural understanding? Let me see what you're going to say in chat box. Does anybody have any idea? How can you use your students in your class? Yes, Cynthia, that's one of the things I was thinking. Ask them about their family backgrounds. Ask them to Google something. Yes, absolutely. There are many ideas, but I was thinking exactly about their, that's my idea, but of course, I'm sure you're going to have many other ideas. You can use students' backgrounds and origins, right? I mean, my own family comes from Germany. Both Germany and Italy. I don't have anybody living that still living that came from Germany or Italy. But you can, include this. This can be considered an ethnographic approach, because they can listen to oral stories, or oral history actually, from a grandfather or grandmother, or if they have a great grandmother. So they're going to be practicing multi-perspectives, right? Because if they have grandfather and grandmother, they can have different opinions or different memories from the same episode. So that is a very good way to train students to conduct interviews with patience and sensitivity, and not to influence the interviewee. So it's very interesting and simple to do, right? And even if they do not have their grandparents or great-grandparents anymore, they can ask their parents what they remember, and then they can Google more, right? One more example: festivals, dances, festas. How are festas juninas and square dancing similar and different, and why? You know that they are both harvest festivals, right? That they started because they were, either getting ready to harvest or getting ready to plant the seeds. So there's a lot of history behind that, and obviously a lot of language. And so the one thing we have to pay attention to when we're not dealing with textbooks, when we're creating our own activities, is that we need to consider the appropriate age for the topic and the language. Do they have the necessary language? But then we need to grade the task accordingly. But there is so much that can be done with our textbooks or without the textbooks in order to raise students' awareness of cross-cultural understanding. When I was researching to talk to you about this today, I found this excellent book. It's downloadable. It's on a PDF and it's downloadable. It's called Developing Intercultural Competence Through Education. It's really amazing. Several of the ideas come from this book. Some are my own. Here's the link. I'm going to copy for you to download this if you're interested. I'm going to copy the link and put it in chat box for all of you. If you feel like reading some more and learning more about cross-cultural understanding or intercultural education, I have just put it in chat box. So we are coming close to the end. I just wanted to say that one other thing that we can do when we want to teach cross-cultural understanding without textbooks is to use their digital experience, right? We have Web 2.0, and that has changed the way students learn. In the past, the teacher was the prime source of information, but not anymore. So nowadays, what we need to do is to encourage our students to learn from their digital experiences, to learn from using social media, Google and YouTube, right? And there are lots of very interesting ideas as to how you can do that, especially, I don't know if you had heard this idea, it was new to me, that you can use YouTube and sort of encourage your students to forge a relationship with someone on YouTube, and that person is going to be their YouTube video pal, and then they can investigate and learn from each other. But of course, that has to have our participation in terms of, we would be the facilitators and we would be encouraging, the analysis and the comparisons and the appropriateness. So there's a lot really that can be done with these our teenagers of today. And if you would like to read more, this is another document that I found. This is just a paper. And this paper is about media literacy and education on YouTube. Very interesting, very interesting. Yes, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in chat box now or in the Q&A tool. I think I did this digital experiences a little bit faster than I wanted to, because I wanted to save time for our question and answer session. So here I am. Is there anything you need to ask or that you would like to ask me? Anything that I said? I see 3. Okay, I see Diogo Raposo Vaz. He has a comment, a question and a comment. He says, does everybody see it in the Q&A tool? I'm going to read it anyway. He says, I sometimes run across topics on textbooks which seem distant from teenagers' realities. The looking for a job thing is a good example of that. I once had an A2 group being questioned about investments in international market. How can we overcome this type of cultural barrier when dealing with teenagers? Two things, Diogo. I don't think this example that you gave, that the textbook, I'm assuming it was a textbook for A2 students being questioned about investments in international market. That is not necessarily cultural per se. It's not necessarily a cultural barrier, because A2 students tend to be, well, they could be 10 or 11 or 12, but they could be adults as well, right? So it might depend on the kind of textbook, if the textbook is meant for teenagers, for preteens or not, right? In this case, I would just change the topic, do something else instead of investments in international market if your students are too young for that. The one for the looking for the job is actually for a bit older teenagers, like 14, 15-year-olds. And that's an excellent opportunity to show them how cultures are different, because the teenagers in the United States, regardless of their social class, they look for jobs during summer, right? And they don't even have to be college students or in the university. As I said, my brother and sister, they weren't even teens. One was 10 and the other was 11, and they had summer jobs. So it really does depend. So I think, and I tweaked it a little bit to the conversation about looking for a job to try to incorporate something related to cross-cultural understanding, right? But you can continue that conversation. Any other question? Are there any questions in chat box? Can you send the link about the YouTube tool? I did. Somebody said, Matt, is it Mateus? I did, didn't I? It's up here. You want me to send it again? Sure. But I did already. If you just scroll up, let me see if it's Control V. Here it is. Here's the link, Mateus, yes. Mateus Dias, that's the link again in chat box. about it's actually a paper that talks about media literacy, YouTube and YouTube, media literacy education and YouTube, and this excellent idea of, encouraging teenagers to have a YouTube video call. But then there's got to be a lot of mediation coming from us, because there are many things that may happen, when kids go on YouTube, when teenagers go on YouTube. And if we want to do it as a school project, then we have to be very careful and organize it very well. But the paper is very good, Mateus. I think you're going to love it. What's the link for the book? It's up here as well, Juliana. If you just scroll up, you will find the link for the book. Well, let me see if I can give it to you again here. No, I know, not for the media tool, but I gave you two links. One is for the media literacy and YouTube pause, the video pause, and the other one is this one for it's the downloadable book on intercultural education. You are. Oops, there you go. Okay, so if you don't have any other questions, to finish, I would like to remind us ourselves that individuals do not become sensitive and open to different ethnic groups until and unless they develop a positive sense of self, including an awareness and acceptance of their own ethnic group. So when we teach cross-cultural understanding, we're also teaching our teenagers to understand and respect themselves and their own origins and backgrounds, and then they're prepared to analyze and understand other ethnic groups, okay? And remember also that understanding, creating, developing an understanding and a tolerance for a culture or a new culture is a dynamic and ongoing process, right? There is always more to learn, and one is never going to be finished. So this can go on forever, and we need to keep on learning how to be more tolerant and more respectful of diversity. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you very, very much for your participation. And I'm sure my colleagues are already posting the link to the feedback questionnaire and to your certificates. Thank you very much once again. It was a pleasure.